Law, go back to your mother's homes, and may the Lord reward you for your kindness to your husbands and to me. May the Lord bless you with the security of another marriage. Then she kissed them goodbye, and they all broke down and wept. No, they said, we want to go with you to your people. But Naomi replied, why should you go on with me? Can I still give birth to other sons who could grow up to be your husbands? No, my daughters, return to your parents' homes, for I am too old to marry again. And even if it were possible and I were to get married tonight and bear sons, then what? Would you wait for them to grow up and refuse to marry someone else? No, of course not, my daughters. Things are far more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord himself has raised his fence against me. And again they wept together, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye. But Ruth clung tightly to Naomi. Look, Naomi said to her, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. You should do the same. But Ruth replied, don't ask me to leave you and turn back. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Wherever you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord punish me severely if I allow anything but death to separate us. When Naomi saw that Ruth was determined to go with her, she said nothing more. I'm not going to spend time kind of building up this whole story of why we're looking into this. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you what God told me. He said, the risks that you take today will be what you're known for tomorrow. The risks, the things that you say yes to, will be what you're known for tomorrow. Women of God, it's time for us to take some risks. It's time for us to be a little brave. That's why that song is so fitting. It's time for us to step out of the boat and step into the water. It's time for us to take some risks. When I first heard the conference title, Ask About Her, I got really excited. I was like, oh, Ruth is easy. Ruth is an easy passage to preach from. Many pastors, I don't know if you've been part of a singles ministry or went to a women's conference like this. Ruth is so easy to pull from because she's just kind of this perfect woman. She kind of has this thing about her where it's like, I don't know if I could do what Ruth did. I don't know if I could leave everything that I knew, go with my mother-in-law to a place I'd never been for. I don't know if I would have that strength, that devotion, that level of loyalty. I'm just being honest. And so when we think about Ruth and when we think about her relationship with Boaz, we kind of have painted it as just this story that's romantic. So often it's like, well, if you want to get your Boaz, be like Ruth. I don't know. I mean, I've even heard that as a single person. I've even said that as a single person. Well, let me go through Ruth and see how I can be. Let me be obedient like Ruth. Let me be loyal like Ruth so that I can get my Boaz. And so often we lose, I think, the real essence of Ruth and her story. And so today I don't want to attack it from the romantic side that I'm sure we've heard so many times again. Today I don't want to make it about Boaz. Because far too often in our society, far too often in our lives, we make it about other people. We make it about the men in our life. We make it about the kids in our life. We make it about the work and the career in our life. But I think God is looking upon the women of God and saying, no, I want to pay some special attention to you right now. And so I don't want to lose sight of who Ruth is by focusing on Boaz. There's so much more to who Ruth is. And so I decided to wipe my mind clean of everything that I thought I knew about Ruth and truly ask about her. Truly seek to see who is this woman of God who got her own book in the Bible. She wasn't a queen like Esther. She wasn't a Jew like Esther, and yet she has her own book in the Bible. There's something special about Ruth. And so as I began to study Ruth, God began to show me that Ruth indeed was not perfect. Ruth was like you and me. Ruth was a woman just like you and me, and it was hard for me to relate at first until I began to understand who she is. So give me a little bit of time to go ahead and lay some of the context and the backstory to this Moabite woman. So Ruth was a Moabite, and if you know anything about the Moabites, they didn't really get along with Israel too much. They kind of were like frenemies. So during the time of Ruth, they were okay, but they had this long history of just being in battle with the Israelites. And so there's just this long-standing tradition of just going against each other. And so if we think about Ruth, if we think about how she was raised and her lineage of people, they didn't really get along with the Israelites. The other thing about Moab is that they worship idols. They worship many gods. They didn't have one God. They didn't really pay too much attention to Jehovah. They worship many gods. And so Ruth grew up in a place where they're worshiping many gods. They don't really care too much about the Israelites. They're kind of doing their own thing. And the other thing we have to know about Moab is that Moab, the country, was kind of founded out of a sinful relationship. So Lot, from Sodom and Gomorrah, he laid with his daughter, and they birthed Moab, who the country was named after. And so if you think just about this legacy of where Ruth comes from, she doesn't come from a churchy place. She doesn't come from a place where she grew up knowing about God. She's full of faith. She sat on the front pew. She worked in the nursery at church. She didn't come from that mentality. Like some of us, she comes from a background where we didn't really know about God. We weren't really taught about God. We were kind of doing our own things. We were brought up in other traditions, other mindsets, other perspectives. And so as you begin to relate to Ruth, we have to remember that she wasn't this person that was just filled with faith and knew God from a young age and always followed him. She was a Moabite. She knew what she knew. She knew what she had been around. The other thing about Ruth, so Ruth gets married. She marries into an Israelite.